could have had 3 kneeing penalties that night.
I guarantee you're on the ice for that.
And I will tell you, if you ever, because to officiate a hockey game is the hardest game, in my opinion, in sport to officiate. And for those of you who are lucky enough, and now being down in the Garden, just standing on the glass and watching the speed of the game, it is crazy how fast it is, and processing it and trying to figure it out. And I'll tell you what, as far as just officiating games and understanding the game and personalities, because so much of everything we do is about people. And I've often said this, and I know that everyone agrees. And this is a perfect example with this 24-hour hockey game. It's the people you meet along the way. And when sport gives you that, it allows you to enrich your life by meeting different people and learning from them, like I said. And just speaking to what Patty said earlier about trots and about consistency and what it takes. I think about Mike Richter as an example. He was probably for me, the best conditioned athlete I ever knew. And often that wasn't the case with the goalies. Because back in those days, the goalies were, they would just stop the puck. We don't care how. We didn't have a big block there. Yeah, exactly. Well, I remember when I first started, I won't tell you who the goalies were. I wasn't allowed to shoot above the pads when they'd skate out in practice, and I never understood why. So, and then I was traded to Edmonton. I'll never forget this. And at the end of practice, Grant Fuhr gave me 10 pucks just outside the hash marks, and he stood on the goal line, and I was allowed to take slap shots and shoot anywhere I want, and he dared me to beat him. And it dawned like it's another anecdotal story, but it quickly tells you why is he one of the greatest. He wasn't that goalie that said, don't shoot above my pads, how dare you. He was like very humble, talking about what you said, humility. And at that time, I was a 21, 22-year-old kid, and I'm like, I couldn't wait to tell my buddies. Grant Fuhr, that's why he's one of the greatest. Because guess what he told me to do? I think I only had 1 or 2 out of 10. I was taking slap shots from 12 feet out or whatever. But to get back to Mike Richter, so one of the things he said about consistency, and you talk about nutrition and sleep, and what Al Arbor said about the balance in life, his thing, and it makes so much sense. It doesn't matter how you apply it. He said that if he's in a game and he takes it to 9 out of 10, after the game, whether it's icing, stretching on the bike, nutrition, sleep, mental rest, focus, everything else, if he didn't take it back down to -9, where he's taking care of his body, to 9, the next night, if he only takes that rest and preparation down to 7, he said, guess what? The next night, when you have a back-to-back or 2 nights later, the farthest you can get back up to is 7. And if you go and you don't take care of yourself and you only recovered at 3, guess what? Your next game, you're only at a 3 when you want to be at a 9 or a 10. And it made so much sense. And it was all about preparation. This can apply to anything. But that was something that, again, those small things that you learn, and just it resonated with me. It's something that you carry with you all the time. And just speaking to Mess's game, people talk about that game 6 in Jersey, and I've talked about this quite often, and they said, were you surprised? Well, I wasn't surprised because I was lucky enough to play with them in 90. And I don't know if you recall, we were playing against Chicago, and this was game 4. We had lost game 3 against Chicago. I was with the Oilers at the time, and we were down 2-1. But they beat us 5 or 6-1, and for anyone that was lucky enough to go to Old Chicago Stadium, like, it was so loud and crazy, and you hit someone into the glass, and it was the old glass. It would basically go back 4 or 5 feet. The national anthem, you couldn't hear anything. The hair on the back of your neck, it was very intimidating. Anyways, we took a lot of penalties. Game 3, we lose. I think it was 5-1. Game 4 comes along. Mess is dressed before everyone else. Like, warm up, totally focused, and it was like you could almost where it was noticeable. Like, you just like, and you know, the stare and everything else. And I was just a young guy. I was only with the team 7 or 8 months. It wasn't like fortunate enough to get to know him as a brother. But at that time, I'd only known him for 8 or 9 months, but heard the stories, watched the Oilers. Big fan. In fact, I remember in the summer of '87 when Gretz was traded, I was working out of hockey school as a kid. And I said, they still have a pretty good team. They might still be able to win it. And then fast forward to 3 years later, I'm playing on the team, and I didn't know if we were going to win or not. I was just a kid. But game 4, so he comes. The only thing he said before the game is, "Listen, we've got to stay out of the box. Play 5-on-5 against Chicago. Stay out of the box." That's all he said. So second shift, he goes out. Elbow. In the box he goes. He comes out, scores a goal. 3 shifts later, elbows someone else, back in the box he goes. And I will tell you, if you ever get a chance to watch this game, for me it was the single greatest game I saw a player play. He had 2 goals, 2 assists. We won 4-2. Dominated physically, mentally, skating. If you watch it, you see the game playing at one speed and Mess, and people don't think about his skating. He was like Patty, he was a superior skater. And you could see it even in Boston in the final that year. You see the speed of the game, and then you see, like Glenn Anderson was pretty close. But you see one guy that's like, wow, who is that guy that's really skating? It was number 11. He was just like a thoroughbred, like just could really, really skate. And I've often said this because I've played with and against the greatest, but Mess was that one guy that he could beat in so many different ways, and he was so mentally tough. And it gets back to that mental, and what Patty said at the end of the season, people say, you must have been physically, from standing in front of the net and getting cross-checked and all this stuff with lights and hands and scars and everything else. You must have been physically exhausted. I'm like, no, I actually could have played another 30 games, but mentally, done. Like after that last game of the season, it was just like you just sleep and your mental and then you start to build it back up for the fall and for the first day of training camp and the testing and all that other stuff. But it just speaks to so many of our lessons that we learn are from people that we meet along the way, and that's the great gift of the game of hockey.
Can I share a story on? Adam just really nailed something here. That Mess could beat you so many different ways, and you're gonna probably view this as, how would the referee let him get away with this? But we have relationships, and Peter Nedved signed as a free agent with Pittsburgh Penguins, and he pissed the captain off with something. I don't know what it was, whether he said something in the media or whatever. But I had Pittsburgh playing in Madison Square Garden the first time after Nedved signed the free agency thing. Mess, and every game that he came onto the ice, he had a smile, and he was like a pond skater. He'd come up behind me, tap me in the ass with a stick. Hey, Fraser, how you doing? Good to see you. How's everything? Just really a sociable guy. We had a great relationship. And this particular night, he had the grisly look on. He had the cold stone stare. And Nedved's the opening face-off. Mess, I dropped the puck. He never even bothered with the puck. He just gave him a short chop across the cuff of the gloves with a stick up on the meat. Nedved's eyes lit up. He backed up. Every face-off that Nedved was on the ice, Mess was on the ice, and he did the same thing. Never went for the puck. Gave him one, just a little short one, a hard one though. He's a strong guy. And he gave him one above the cuff of the gloves, and I let him do it. Finally, and the last face-off, 30 seconds left, and it's in the end zone, and he does her again, and Nedved is backing up, and he's slipping in his own shit. He's so scared. And I went, the horn goes, and I skated over. I said, Mess, I said, are you done? Because I said, I'm starting to get embarrassed. He said, I'm done, Kerry. Thanks a lot. He got the message. And that was it. And he never touched the puck the rest of the night. And one of the interesting things is, on the back of my book, Mess wrote a quote, and as soon as he sent it to me, I had to go right back to that game with Nedved. And Mess says, I always felt Kerry understood the psychology of hockey and was always aware of the intimidation factor that was being presented by the teams or certain players. Kerry had the ability to maintain complete control of the game. I really believe he wanted the players themselves to play the game the way it was meant to be played, with courage, honor, and respect. And that really, for me, summed it up with that, my allowance of him to do that to Nedved. And there's certain things players had to solve themselves, I thought.
Well, listen, I would agree with what Mess said, because our careers aren't that much different. You probably were, when did you start?
80.
So I was 83, 84, and not much longer. But one thing I remember about Kerry was Kerry had a composure about him where some of the referees, if you went and kind of in the psychology of being a referee, and back then, there was a lot, the boundaries of what you could do were a little bit wider. And you had to be somewhat of a psychologist, like a coach. But I always remember approaching Kerry, and he was always respectful, but always wanting to let you know that he hears you, and that he's here to ref the best game, and he doesn't want to be the guy that has anything to do with the outcome. You guys play, let me do my job, you do yours. But he was always approachable. And I always respected, so I agreed when I was listening to Mess, I was nodding, because that's how I remember, and it was consistent. You knew what you were gonna get. Some guys, and I won't name names, but some guys were super sensitive. Some guys would hold it against you, and they would make sure that, and Kerry just had a way. It's like, if you talk to somebody in an attacking way, they're feeling attacked, it's not going anywhere, and you're probably going to get back, and it's going to get ugly. But if you approach in a respectful way, it's amazing what words and body language can do. And it brings me to a couple stories, and I'll touch on Al Arbor that you always talked about. I used to say, Al, what made you? Because I say he's the Vince Lombardi of hockey, and I would say, Al, what's your secret? Like, I ended up getting into coaching, I think, and I always used a lot of Al Arborisms, and but he goes, Pat, listen, I had Scotty Bowman as my coach. I had Billy Ray as my coach. He said, I'll be honest with you, he said, I learned so much from all of them. And then I took the pieces I liked that I learned, and I took a little bit of my own personality and what I liked and how I learned from some players. He goes, and I just made it my way of how I thought I could communicate and be authentic. And so here's one of the, if not the greatest coach in the game, and yet he's giving credit to the guys that he learned from, to Adams, that he talked about. And then I'll add a quick story of leadership and somebody who could turn a game around, and we talked about Brian Trottier. People forget we were down 2-0 against the Rangers in '84 and came back, and that was the Kenny Morrow overtime game 5. But we were also down to the Canadians 2-0 in the conference finals. And there was a sixth sense about that team, and I was so honored to be. I was 19, and there was this inner confidence that you didn't have to say anything. We're gonna win the game. We're gonna find a way to win the game. And we're down 2-0. I think the guys, once again, the guys mentally, Al Arbor would say, come playoff time to the team, because it's 80% mental, 20% physical. And I don't give a shit if the roof is coming down. Don't lose your focus. And if we win, we win. Don't get too high. If we lose, we lose. So I watched these guys, win or lose, they were the same demeanor at every practice. And yet, people on the outside are like, did you see that game last night? But these guys were just complete, steady demeanor. And we're losing 2-0. And so everybody's already written us off. The Canadians are going to win. They're coming back. The Islanders are done. So there was a moment, and this is the great players. Brian Trottier, feel of the game. And back then, this code. He saw an opportunity, and we were getting beat, and we needed to change momentum. Life is about momentum. And Bob Gainey carried the puck behind the net, and Bob Gainey's super respected and an amazing champion and captain. And he had turned, and some people had thought it was a hit from behind. It might be today, but back then it was accepted. But Trotz, I watched him. He went in and he let him have a little extra to say, we're not losing, and we're not letting you beat us. We'll not let that happen. He hit him hard enough that he went down, and he ended up separating his shoulder, and he was out for the series. Well, take the momentum and just flip it. We went on to win the next 4 games in a row. Now, whether it's a hit, whether it's a big goal, whether it's a big save, there are moments in a series that become the game changer that puts you in a situation. You have to have a sense and a feeling of the moment and when it's right. And there's no way Trotz wanted to hurt him. But Trotz was a winner, and he said this was a statement hit, and the guy had the puck, and he was their captain, and Trotz was assistant, similar to captain, and he just gave him an extra hit, and we all saw it, and then they had to carry their captain off, and I know Trotz felt bad. Trotz did not want to hurt him, but he wanted to hit him hard. Boom. Went to Stanley Cup Finals and then played some guys named Gretzky and Messier. Anyway, but they had lost before, the 4 years earlier. And so, it speaks to the respect, it speaks to the code. And I would say the single greatest word that would describe, if you had to use one word, is humility. Because if you look at the best players in the game, they're the most humble. And everybody follows that code. It goes for referees, it goes for coaches, it goes for trainers, it goes for players. Humility is a big, big word. And if you don't have vulnerability and humility, you don't have leadership. Because I am not going to follow somebody who's not willing to be vulnerable, is not willing to have humility and be authentic. Because when you're in the trenches, when you're in the locker room, when you're a part of the family, there is no BS. It's all out. You're a family, and you'll follow people who show humility and are not afraid to be vulnerable. I used to always mess with, be crying at everything. This guy emotionally loves his team. He loves his player. I always say Trotz and Messier were, during my time, were the two greatest leaders in hockey.